If you want to protect yourself, get a double-barrel shotgun, have the shells, a 12-gauge shotgun, and I promise you, as I told my wife, we live in an area that's wooded and somewhat secluded. I said, Jill, if there's ever a problem, just walk out on the balcony here or walk out, put that double-barrel shotgun and fire 2 blasts outside the house. I promise you, who's ever coming in is not going to, you don't need an AR-15. It's harder to aim, it's harder to use, and in fact, you don't need 30 rounds to protect yourself. Buy a shotgun.
There are, it's almost like where do you start?
Have them come to Philadelphia, have them come to Detroit, Chicago, and walk outside and use a shotgun and see what happens at that point.
Aren't warning shots illegal?
You know, Americans ought to have the right to defend themselves precisely the way that the Constitution and our founders understood it. Somehow the idea that President Biden gets to decide precisely which firearms we ought to have and precisely how we ought to protect our home and our family is absolutely ludicrous.
It's harder to aim, it's harder to use.
So if it's harder to shoot an AR-15 than it is a double-barrel shotgun, why aren't we banning double-barrel shotguns?
You know, the president addressing gun violence in the country and putting in place additional safety measures is something that the president has a personal commitment to, and his history on this issue is evidence of that. You know, he's obviously taken on the NRA twice and won, and he is happy and eager to do that in the future.
When? When did he take on the end? When did he win? I must have missed that gunfight.
You know, I got to say the left, they practice deception. Number one, the framing about taking on gun violence. Let me say, it'd be very good for Joe Biden to take on gun violence. Here's the way you do that. You go after criminals. You go after murderers. You go after people who use guns to kill people and hurt people, and you put them in jail and you prosecute them. Now, we'll see what Joe Biden does, but I can tell you what Barack Obama and Joe Biden did, which is they ratcheted back the prosecution of gun crimes. They reduced the resources, the time, the energy, the cases that were brought prosecuting actual criminals. And by the way, Kamala Harris, the vice president, raised money to bail out violent criminals who were rioting in our country. So when I hear a Democratic spokeswoman say, we're against gun violence, no, you're not. When you're funding it, when you're celebrating it, when you're encouraging it, you want to be against gun violence, go after the criminals.
He's had guns and protection around him his entire life, and yet we see what's happening in those communities that do not have the same protection.
But, you know, she is right in something. If you want to know what Joe Biden will do, look to the history. When he was asked, are you going to come after the gun rights of law-abiding citizens, his answer was bingo. That's exactly what the far left wants. They don't want to stop criminals with guns, which we all should be united on. They want to stop you from having the right to defend yourself. They want to disarm you, not because you're violent, not because you're a criminal, but because you're a free and independent American. We're going to defend our liberty, despite their lies.
But I got news for you. I'm sure there's not a veteran here who would take an AR-16 with a long clip to go out and shoot a deer or shoot anything. There has no business. Joe led the fight to get those things off the street.
Mr. Kerry, AR-16s are already off the street. They don't exist.
They really believe they know everything about everything, and they know nothing about guns.
So in other words, the guy who flies around the world in his private jet lecturing us about climate change is now telling us that we're going to get rid of a gun that doesn't exist. Oh, you know, just brilliant.